The U.S. is facing a federal deficit of $4 trillion in 2020. Meanwhile, Washington may spend as much as $8 trillion in the stimulus. $4 trillion deficit this year, and with all these stimulus bills, we are already over $4 trillion, it will be a lot more. Treasury will now have to borrow an additional $3 trillion just for the remainder of 2020. Plus, $6 trillion added on the Fed balance sheet. The elephant in the room is inflation. When it comes, it will be unlike any that we have ever witnessed before in the U.S. The system obviously is at the end of its shelf life. This test run must be exceeding the wildest expectations of its engineers. Trump's economy has fallen on deficit years. Make America poor again. As tens of millions of Americans lose their jobs during this pandemic, Congress is struggling to come up with another bailout. We have more than 33 million Americans that have lost their jobs in the last 7 weeks. Those numbers are going to go up again in the next day or two when we get the new reports. While millions of American workers are desperate for a stimulus package of their own. 82 years and the third wealthiest member in the House, Nancy Pelosi, is trying to pass a bailout for the K Street lobbyists. These lobbyists, million-dollar lobbying firms, would now suddenly be able to take money out of the Paycheck Protection Plan, which is the small business loan program that's designed to keep these mom-and-pop businesses running. But instead, Pelosi came out and said we want lobbyists to be able to raid it because they've spent a lot of money lobbying to get us to bail them out. Every dollar will go to all her wealthy, liberal bloodsucking friends. Not a dime to anyone else. Don't be a picker, Nancy, a quadrillion is the new trillion. We are going to lose the dollar anyway, go big. You can bet your bottom dollar that anything Pelosi is trying to do is bad for the country. Judicial Watch is reporting that Pelosi tried to strip voter ID laws from 35 states in the last COVID bill. Can you imagine how screwed up she has to be pulling that up, instead of worrying about people out of work getting some support for food? If the virus doesn't get us, our degenerate Congress will. K Street refers to the area in downtown Washington, D.C., where many lobbyists, lawyers, and advocacy groups have their offices. It's become a term to refer to the lobbying industry as a whole. K Street is widely criticized for the influence it exerts over politicians. Analysts argue that lobbyists working for, say, the pharmaceutical industry is influencing legislation in a way that benefits the industry, rather than the ordinary Americans. So Nancy Pelosi is bailing out those who pay her, so she is expecting a kickback for bailing them out. A bailout for the people whose greed caused the crash. This is a corporate, bankers' takeover. It's to the point that these politicians received so much money from the corporations for selling out the people that they no longer care what people think because they're set for the rest of their lives. If this doesn't show you there's not much difference between parties, you'll never get it. They realized that the stupid voters would keep re-electing them no matter what they do. The $2.2 trillion coronavirus relief bill was just the beginning of a Washington lobbying bonanza. But lobbyists are rushing to get a piece of the action in case it evaporates with a cratering economy. They are so eager to bail out their buddies on Wall Street first. They are the first ones that get paid first while America is treated as second-class citizens. We are used as a piggy bank for the rich. With their hand in the jar first. All we Americans are doing is keeping the rich richer at our expense. K Street shouldn't get one single penny from the U.S. taxpayers. They exist for the benefit of rich corporations. Nancy Pelosi must be removed from office now. The whole of American politics should be put in the lunatic asylum. Don't forget these are elected members of the House. Change 50% of the folks, and you will change the USA. Don't blame the symptoms, blame the cause. Now they're just making fun of you Americans. And you're not on the streets because they've scared you with the new corona that has the same number of deaths like every other flu season. The numbers don't lie, unlike the politicians and media that we caught endless times lying. Imagine how they must be laughing at you. Hell, even I am laughing right now at how ridiculous the theft has become. Lobbyists are hustling to influence the rules dictating how the first bundle of the stimulus money will be spent, and looking ahead to how to get their clients' priorities into the next mammoth spending package. The Trump-Pelosi stimulus scam gave $6 trillion to corporations and banks. Nothing for 33 million unemployed workers. No UBI. No healthcare. No re-election. Democrats and Republicans betrayed workers. corporate Democrats work right alongside corporate Republicans. It's idiotic to think that the corporate Democrats are any kind of opposition to Trump. That's theater. They want 4 more years of Trump, they rubber stamp all of his legislation. They are running their worst candidate, Biden, because they want Trump. Both are owned by the globalists. Wake up already. When will the people in this country will realize that both Republicans and Democrats don't give a damn about us, and this is one huge theft? It's totally out of control. They don't even bother to hide it anymore. Change will never happen by continuing to support the corrupt system that oppresses you. Both Republicans and Democrats are stealing all the wealth for the 1% as fast as they can under the guise of a pandemic. Just look over there, China, while we passed a fake stimulus bill that gave all the taxpayers crumbs. $6 trillion, and most of it was given to the big corporations. I bet most Americans really believe it's China's fault when they repeat it enough, just like Iraq with WMD. They are all on board for the fleecing of America. When you give billion to corporate welfare, and you spend trillions on military defense and then print money with no backing, what do you think would happen? Our government is corrupt to the very top. Our system will inevitably self-destruct by its very design. All it took was a trigger to set everything in motion, and here it is. Now, we have to abandon the system that's finally failed us, in favor of one that cannot fail us by its very design. Let's embrace true change for once. And not the change that politicians promise us. Don't allow ignorance to be the fatal downfall of yourself and those you love. Biden or Trump? Why even bother to vote? The USA needs a radical political reform. Welcome back to the Atlantis Report. You are here for your daily dose of the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. The US is printing money faster than the spread of coronavirus. At this rate, why don't they just let us all print our own on napkins? It will be as valuable as toilet paper. The limiting factor in the Weimar was ink, and the wages of the one group that could demand payment, the actual printers. Between the Fed printing, the mindless drooling Pelosi, and toilet paper hoarders, I am surprised we have not killed every tree on the planet. They're going to print until the dollar isn't even worth printing. Politicians are morons, they can't count. They have no concept of how big of a number a trillion is. Every working American would have about $6,000 to pay for each $1 trillion spent, on top of whatever is there. Therefore, the first $2 trillion will consume about 20% of an average person paycheck. Now, this stupid cow wants another $1 trillion on top of all that. Americans cannot afford this. Period. When you give away unlimited money, it shows what it's really worth. Here's how fractional reserve banking with debt-based fiat money works. Borrow $1 trillion, that's debt. Banks loan out $10 trillion, because $10 of loans with $1 debt reserve, the current reserve ratio is 10 to 1. The money supply grows by $10 trillion. Banks get about 10% interest on the loans, forever. You can't play this backward. You can't pay off the loans because paying it back shrinks the money supply, and the bankers have collected the interest already. It's all fun and games until you go bankrupt and lose reserve currency status. This does not sound positive for King Dollar. We are truly living in interesting times. According to most budget experts, Bush and Obama buried a combined $5 trillion in the sands of Iraq. Granted, over many years, but still burning it up would have been more productive. All this fake money is the root of all evil. Human existence has become nothing more than a scramble to keep your head above water for the privilege to continue scrambling to keep your head above water. It's when there is no food that gets really interesting. The only bill I want to see from Congress is a balanced budget bill that reduces government by 70%. We are now at the stage where we need to shut down all government employee salaries, pensions, and health coverage. These are clearly extraneous expenses. Government employees, aka civil servants, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. It's time to step up to the plate as the patriots we know you are and stop collecting your paycheck for the good of this nation. We as a nation are under a state of emergency, so Mr. President, I ask that you immediately under this emergency declaration cease and desist all payments to government employees and divert these resources to the productive citizens of these United States. Use the newly allocated monetary resources to invest in the facilitation of small businesses, the development of infrastructure, and the protection of the American way of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, protecting our Constitution and those unalienable rights. It's time. Things are becoming insane. The evil and perversion are getting worse, and governments and societies are collapsing. But yet so many people act like everything is normal. They go on with their normal daily lives like everything is fine, completely oblivious to the collapsing world around them. We can't keep going on like this, acting like everything is fine when the world is actually collapsing. Banks will reap the rewards of negative rates. Again, legally, they will reach into your account each month and withdraw funds while at the same time lending out 90% of your deposit and charge whatever rate they like. It is legal theft on a grand scale. Enough with the spending. To actually reduce the federal deficit, the real answer is all of the above: cuts to spending and makes sure taxes are increased to cover actual costs. The idea that cutting taxes will somehow decrease the deficit was shown to be false when it didn't work for President Reagan in the early 80s. At least Reagan realized the deficit was dramatically increasing and passed a large tax increase in 1986 to at least minimize the deficit. Unfortunately, President George H.W. Bush made the foolish promise of no new taxes, then realized that for the spending demanded of the federal government, there was no option but to raise taxes. President Clinton sensibly kept vetoing tax cuts, and at the end of his term, the U.S. had a budget surplus. Defense cuts. Entitlement cuts. Subsidies to energy and public land users. Reduction of federal agency workforce. When the economy is doing well, the budget deficit should be paid off so that in a downturn, there can be deficit spending to prevent a depression. Want a 21% cut in federal spending? Eliminate interest on the debt by paying off the debt. Want to keep federal spending down? When the economy is doing well, any increase in federal spending must be paid for with tax increases. Want to go to war? No paying for it with existing revenues. Taxes go up to pay for it. This will make voters realize what the real cost of spending is. Want a rail system in your city? You pay for it, preferably out of the user fees. That is a way to get responsible spending of tax revenue. Otherwise, the continued deficit spending will result in even more tax dollars are simply going to pay interest. If the federal government now covers the debt of the states that have spent irresponsibility, it will only encourage more of the same. Bankruptcy is the only sensible recourse for those states with all sides taking an equal hit, so it never happens again. That includes the banks, the unions, and the bondholders. This so-called flu virus was their excuse to do QE to save their asses. It's the same old song and dance again. Yup, everything is going according to the pandemic. I wonder if the sheeple will ever realize they lost their jobs, homes, and businesses for absolutely nothing. America faces an unparalleled economic catastrophe. What retail sales cratering tell us is two things. First, people stay home, in times like these, even if they can go out and shop. Second, they consume less because their optimism is gone. As the economy adapts to a permanently lower level of spending, a wave of businesses will have to shutter its doors, meaning today's job losses become permanent, and that is how a whole economy grows poorer. A new pool of people will then have to compete for what jobs there are on offer. That will erode the bargaining power of workers, so incomes will fall further. And what jobs are on offer are dead-end, go-nowhere jobs mostly, anyways, low-wage service jobs, which is the modern American pundit's way of saying, you're a servant all over again, just like your grandparents maybe were. Poof. There go whole centuries of progress. No, I'm not kidding. An economy of people driving Ubers and delivering Instacarts and selling pallets on Amazon isn't one of the people reaching their potential. It's not one of the great discoveries and breakthroughs in creativity and imagination, and freedom. It's just one of soul-crushing menial labor. That is what it means for an economy to grow poorer. The human potential goes up in smoke, and history rewinds. Instead of that chance to become that great artist, novelist, scientist, entrepreneur, yes, you wind up a glorified servant. You could have been something, but now you drive an Uber by day and sell stuff on Amazon by night, just to put food on the table. As a result, society itself grows impoverished in the truest way of all the things you might have created. Maybe you would have discovered that cure, or written that chronicle of the pandemic, or made that documentary, or employed a few hundred people. Now? You're just another servant, in an economy of them. This is what most economies through history have always been, sadly, and that is why progress means the freedom not to live in the servitude that comes from poverty. Depressions do more harm than we fully know. Americans haven't suffered one in recent history, but they're about to. And they're about to learn, the hard way. Depressions are things for which we have no good words. The opposite of seeds, things which undo harvests and unmake gardens. They are like viruses of the human spirit. They take us backward in time, as they plunge us downwards into the abyss. Headlong enough that way, and you find yourself in a dark age. But that perhaps, is just where foolish, brutal, indecent men like Donald J. Trump have always been living and want the rest of us to, too. Rest in peace, American economy. Zombie bailout nation. Got gold? Real, physical gold? I feel that soon the public, the media and investors will not only learn why gold is essential but will also find out what today's money is good for. This was the Atlantis Report. Please like, share, subscribe. And please take some time to subscribe to my backup channels, I do upload videos there too. You'll find the links in the description box. You will also find a PayPal link if you want to make a donation. Thank you wholeheartedly to all those of you who have already donated. Stay safe and healthy, friends.